Hey everybody, what's up and welcome to this week's Q&A. Now, if some of you have been following us and following the Q&As, you'll know that a few weeks back, just before Christmas, we had some issues with sound. So this session is actually a re-record of those particular questions with a couple of extra ones added in because the sound was so distorted that basically the live stream was unusable. So a few of you guys who have watched asked me if I could redo it because obviously you were unable to hear my answers. So that's what we're here to do today. Of course, as you guys know, if you have any particular questions whilst we're on here live, just drop them in the comments and I will get them answered for you before we finish up here. Absolutely not a problem at all. Obviously, as you guys know, I'm here to help you and to serve you to the best of my ability. So if you have those questions, make sure you get them dropped in and I will make sure I answer them before we finish. Okay, so to save wasting any time, let's get straight into it. So what we got here. So our first question is, if you have a flu or a cold, what is the best thing to take? I'm taking paracetamol, also lemons, honey, cider, water mix. Okay, cool. So those things will potentially help. Obviously, paracetamol will help with any pain or aching and things like that you've got. Now, doing what I do and taking the approach that I take, we tend to work more on the holistic side of things and try to go down the natural route here. But of course, you've got to do what works best for you. So in my opinion and in my world, I try to avoid medications where possible, even things like paracetamol and aspirin and things like that. But of course, like most things, there is a time and a place for them, particularly if you don't know of any alternatives. But what else did you mention? You mentioned lemons, honey, cider, water mix. So yeah, lemons have been shown to help. Honey, particularly if it's a good honey with a high MgO content and so on. And apple cider vinegar, also a very good thing that you can use. So what you're doing is working pretty well. But I will let you know what it is I do. And if you want to add this to your kind of cold or flu attack, then you can do. So one of the first things that I do, if I feel like I might be coming down with something, for example, if I wake up and I've got a bit of a throat on and I'm like, feels like I could be catching something here. The first thing that I will do is start dosing up with this. So if I get my face out of the way, it should, there you go. So this is wild oil of oregano. Now, this particular one is just the standard strength. They also have one that is a super strength by the same brand. So this is North American Herb and Spice. And what's been shown in much of the research is that oregano oil is one of nature's most potent antibacterials, antiviral, antifungal, antimicrobial, etc. So it can be very effective at wiping out any sort of bacterial infections and things that you might have. You do sometimes, as you first start using it, have to kind of build yourself up to get used to it. But I found it to be very effective. Quite often, like I say, if I feel like I'm coming down with something, I start taking this 3-4 times a day. And what I find is it then prevents the cold or the flu or whatever it was going to be from fully developing. So it's just like, got this. And then within a day or so, it's completely gone and all is back to normal. Now, the recommended dosage is two drops. But of course, like on any supplement, they always have to go with a lower than you maybe actually need type dosage on their recommendations. Now, as I mentioned, when you first get started, you might want to use a relatively small amount, but once you get used to it, so I'll show you exactly what I do. I will get approximately a bit more than that. So don't know if you can see that. So I will use approximately this much, okay, each time or each dose, and put that straight underneath the tongue. It is very hot. So sometimes when you're getting used to it, you might want to have a glass of water on hand. And what I tend to do, you can either just take it straight and eat once you've gotten used to the heat. But if not, what I would do is you would put it under your tongue, get a little bit of water, sip it, swish it all around your mouth. And then when you swallow it in a way where you're deliberately coating the whole back of your mouth and throat with the oil and the water as it goes down. And I found that to be very effective, particularly if you feel like you're getting a sore throat or something along the lines of tonsillitis type symptoms and so on. I found it to be very useful. The other thing that I will take, just to help with clearing airways and so on, is this one. So this is called Thieves. This one is by Young Living. And again, very, very effective. Basically with this one, all I do, in fact, I'll show you here right now. So just get your hand and then I spray 1, 2, like so, rub it together and then inhale it. Like so. And that's just a good way to kind of cleanse the airways and so on. And again, that alongside the oregano oil, I found to be very effective. Now, of course, a lot of people will use things like vitamin C and high dose multivitamins and things like that, which is fine if you find that works for you. But I found those two to be the main ones that I will turn to if I feel like I'm getting something and I want to prevent it. Once I've already got it, same approach. You know, if I do happen to catch a cold and didn't realize, or if I just woke up feeling absolutely like crap, then that would be my immediate go-to as well to help clear it. Because personally, I would rather use something like this, the oregano oil, than an antibiotic and so on. That said, because it is so powerful and like an antibiotic, it can't discern or sort of choose which bacteria or whatever it's going to kill. So you take an antibiotic and it just kills any bacteria that it comes into contact with. Essentially, it's the same type of principle with this. So if you are going to use it for extended periods or at relatively high doses, I highly recommend you use a good probiotic as well. That way, any potential negative effect or damage that you might cause to your gut flora and so on, you will then obviously rectify that, replenish and replace that with that good probiotic or fermented foods and so on. So that is our first question. That's what I recommend when it comes to colds, flus, things like that. Question 2 is, what if you are happy how you are, but your partner wants you to change? Now, these are the types of questions I like. Of course, I like all questions, but stuff like this I like because it always leads on to an opportunity to kind of mention responsibility of self, which, if you know anything about what I do and the system that I teach and the way I coach, ruthless responsibility of self is our number one rule. That's the underlying foundation of everything that we do. So what if you're happy with how you are, but your partner wants you to change? Well, the first thing that I will say outside of ruthless responsibility, which we'll get onto in a moment, is the truth is nobody has a right to force you or require you to change. That said, coming back to responsibility, if you get into a relationship with somebody, you do at the same time have a certain level of responsibility to maintain some level of attractiveness to this person if you want to remain in the relationship. So obviously you've said, well, what if they want you to change? You haven't kind of said how. So we don't know if you necessarily mean in terms of who you are, who you're showing up as, the type of person you are, or whether you mean in your body. But ultimately, the same principle applies. Like if I get into a relationship with someone and I happen to be fit, lean, strong, healthy, and I've got a good mindset and so on, and then some things happen over the years and I get a bit too comfortable in the relationship, I let my body go and I let my personality go and I become this negative, whiny bitch, then my partner would be within her rights to be pissed off about that, to be like, hold on a fucking moment. This is not the relationship I signed up for. You are now not the person I got into a relationship with. Now, at the same time, I do believe that everybody should change over time because theoretically, surely hopefully you're striving to be more, to be better, and so on in all areas of life, whether we're talking in the body, the being, the balance, or the business. Hopefully you're trying to grow and become more. But that's different to allowing yourself to slide and become less. So if you are striving to become more, then it's on your partner to hopefully rise alongside you so that you don't essentially outgrow her or him and whatnot. So whilst there's a part of me that says, well, they don't have the right to change you, I also understand that, well, if you've let yourself drift in a negative way, then they do have a right to call you out on that bullshit because that's not what they signed up for. One way to kind of look at it is if you want to maintain a good sort of relationship and a good level of connection between you, aside from things like communication and obviously just being decent people, you have to remain the type of person that your partner wants to date. And the same goes for her or him, depending who you like to swing with. But ultimately, you should be trying to strive and improve. And you should constantly be under this idea of, I need to remain the type of person that my partner finds attractive. Not just physically, I just mean in general, like all aspects of you. And that's not to say that people don't outgrow each other. Of course they do. But at the end of the day, in an ideal relationship, you'll kind of both be butting heads here and there, but not just to be whiny bastards with each other, more to actually help you both grow. So you're kind of constantly, what's the word? Not so much on each other's back, but kind of prodding each other and poking in, because we all get triggered by certain things our partners do. And sometimes it's because we have a sense of entitlement around the way we believe they should act. And now they're not acting in that way that we think they should act. So therefore we get pissed off and whingy. But then other times it's just they start taking the relationship for granted, or they start to let their standards slip because they're comfortable in the relationship now and so on. And of course that starts to trigger us too. So I do believe that we should be able to kind of have open communication pathways where we can call each other out. Of course, we have to be relevant and strategic about how we do that so that we don't just trigger them and then end up arguing about it all the time, because we want to encourage growth between the two of us, not just from one side. So yeah, in reality, I don't see that it's a problem that your partner would want you to change. It's more a case of how and why they want you to change. If it's because you've let yourself go, well, then maybe they're perfectly within their right. But if it's instead because you've been rising and they've refused to rise, well, then maybe not. If you are doing things to make you a better person, a better being, but they aren't keeping up, well, then it's on them. Because sometimes people want others to change because they're not willing to change themselves. And therefore we think, well, if I control all these things external to me, then I'll be happy. But often we don't find that. So instead, what we have to actually do is change who we are and who we're showing up as, so that we have a new perspective about the outside world that we're experiencing. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, so there are lots of ways to look at it, but whether your partner wants you to change or not, it would come down to the context within the reasons why they want you to change. Cool. So what's our next question? Question number 3. It often seems to me to have the right people around you. Try to stay away from the negative and go towards the positive. How do you not let the negative in? I myself either shut down or walk away. Lol. Okay, so let's break this down. There's several pieces. So the first piece is, it often seems to me to have the right people around you. So yes, I would argue that it's important for all of us to ideally have plenty of the right people around us. Now, you guys have possibly heard the saying that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now, if there is truth in that, which there likely is, but excuse me, if there is enough truth in that it will affect the way that you start showing up, then of course it is very important for us to pick specific people that we choose to be around. So we might find that we like certain people and we feel comfortable around them, but there is a good chance that maybe they're not serving us. If they're very negative biased and maybe not striving for growth themselves, unfortunately, that can often give us an excuse to not try and grow too. Whereas if you're around people who are striving for growth and striving to be better and to be more and so on, well, that tends to naturally bleed into you, and being around that energy will encourage you to do more so. Often because when we start seeing it as being possible for others around us, we also then think, oh, well, maybe this is possible for me too. Now, of course, depending where we're at in terms of our mind and emotional capacity, it may flip the other way. And instead we see people growing and we're like, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. But hopefully you're not in that place. And as I say, being around that more positive growth-based energy will allow you to do the same. So yes, it would be good to have the right people around you. So should we try to stay away from the negative and go towards the positive? As a kind of general rule and a simple answer, we would say yes. But at the same time, it's not so much about the energy you're around. It's more about how you allow that energy to influence you. So just because you're around negative energy doesn't mean that you have to take on that negative energy too. Now, of course, there is an element of, well, if you're around it for too long, it's going to have some kind of influence on you, because you're going to have at least a mental perception of what you're experiencing. And of course, our perceptions often then relay into our emotional states and will affect our emotional state and so on, and how we show up or see or feel about things that we are seeing and experiencing. So yes, as a general rule, we want to move towards more positive things and more positive people. But at the same time, if we have learned how to kind of discern what's right, what's wrong, and whether something is going to serve us or not, we don't have to take on the so-called negative energy and allow it to affect us. Because the beauty of this game of life is, once you actually learn about you and understand who you are, then it actually becomes a choice as to what you do or do not allow into your inner world. But of course, that does take a little bit of practice and a willingness to kind of show up and see the world differently, or at least have an ability to reframe things as you experience them, rather than just constantly be a kind of a victim of it and immediately react. Instead, you observe and then discern and respond. But of course, that does take a little bit of practice. Now, how do you not let the negative in? So this would be down to your emotional state, as I say. And then you mentioned that I myself either shut down or walk away. Now, if this is because you're experiencing something negative or negative people, and you're just like, oh, you know what, can't deal with this, I can't be bothered with you, it's a waste of my time to even try and engage and like put my point across or whatever the thing might be, then maybe you are better off to just walk away, save the headspace, save the emotional bullshit that might come from it, and just walk away. But we just need to be careful about the energy with which that comes from. If it's more from a place of victimhood, and it's like, I don't feel confident enough or have the power and the self-esteem to assert myself in this scenario or this situation, so therefore I shut down and walk away because I'm hiding from the conflict, or I'm being a people pleaser, well, then that's different. We don't want that. So in that sense, shutting down, walking away wouldn't be ideal, because unfortunately you've allowed yourself to become the victim of it, and therefore you ran away. You didn't confront the problem, which isn't really this external thing. It's the lack of power within you to confront it was the problem. But if it is more a case of, actually, I'm here now, I'm experiencing this thing, I've got two choices. I can either engage in this rubbish and this negativity and accept the consequences of it, or, you know, I could just walk away and not even bother myself with it. It's not going to serve me to engage in this. Well, then that's different. If you're making the decision, shutting down, walking away from a place of power is much better than doing it from a place of, holy shit, I don't think I can hold my own here, or I'm a bit of a victim, or the lesser or weaker one in this particular scenario, so therefore I better remove myself from it. So that's what I would kind of say around this kind of negative positive energy thing. Okay. Question number 4. Going back to flus and colds, should you rest or should you still do things? I suppose I just listen to my body. And yes, in reality, if you have spent the time to actually get to know you, and this sounds a bit weird to some people when you first say it, because like, well, of course I know me as my body. But the truth is, many of us don't. We tend to operate pretty much on autopilot. And most of us are completely unaware of which foods do or do not serve us, which drinks, which activities in life, and so on. We just tend to end up in this kind of numb existence of same old, just carry on, plodding on, and so on. And very rarely do we take the time to actually discern if something is benefiting us or not. We just kind of go along with it and get pulled along in the cycle of life and the sort of chaos of it these days, rather than actually taking the time to almost witness yourself. So if you can take the time to almost remove yourself from yourself, as weird as that sounds, but so that you become the observer of your actions, then it becomes much easier for you to pick and choose them in the moment. So should you rest or should you still do things or listen to your body? I would say yes, if you can, if you have enough knowledge of self and relationship with self that you can listen to your body, you would know. It's like, do I need to do some exercise here and so on? Or should I just rest and do nothing? Now, of course, sometimes if you are ill enough, you do want to rest, because what we have to remember is that if I'm ill, my body has shifted into what we call a sympathetic state. So the autonomic nervous system obviously will respond. It will shift me into what we call a sympathetic response, which is essentially your fight or flight response. So the stress response in the body is where you'll get shifted because you're now ill, and the body needs to respond to it because something's gone wrong. So it needs to be addressed and corrected. Now, we have to remember that, for example, if I'm excessively active or physical, that also shifts me towards that fight or flight response. If I go and do a hard workout, that pushes me towards that response too. So we don't want to kind of overload that side of the system or completely exhaust and deplete it whilst we're ill, because it's like, well, if I'm already over there to try and deal with the illness, my immune system and everything's active, my hormonal system's active and so on, then I go and slam a load of training or physical activity and doing things on it, well, then I run the potential of overwhelming my system and maybe prolonging the illness or giving the illness an opportunity to kind of get deeper into my system. That said, on occasion, if you kind of get the balance right, sometimes people find actually if I go and do a particular type of workout, I actually feel better. It gives my body a bit of a boost. I feel better mentally for having gone and done something. And it almost gives my body a bit of a kick to get over it even quicker. Now, of course, hopefully you would know with yourself whether this is the case or not. But one of the things that kind of everyone can do, regardless of whether you know that working out or whatever does help you, is instead to do a work in. Now, what this means is like, oh, I've gotten an illness, I feel rough. Should I do some exercise or not? Well, what you can do is, as I say, work in, because to work out means to get rid of energy. Exercise means to get rid of. Whereas if we work in, then the idea or the goal is actually to bring energy in, to cultivate energy within the body instead, to give it some assistance essentially and some additional resources in terms of energy and so on to help me deal with the illness or the issue that I currently have. So a work in would be things like meditation. It would be things like, Tai Chi, yoga, mind went blank there. And things like that, even stretching with deep breathing and so on. You can do a conventional type workout, but instead you would slow your tempos and you would only work up to around 60%. So let's say, for example, oh, I normally lift 100 kilos in this particular workout. Well, today you don't go beyond 60. And then what that will do is allow you to still stimulate the body and the blood flow and the muscles and so on, but without pushing yourself too deep into that fight or flight response. And then that way, hopefully your body will have that additional energy and stuff on board. You'll often feel a lot better for it because you have brought more energy in through breathing deeper and so on, and almost doing like a form of movement-based meditation with your workout rather than going in with the idea, oh, I need to smash myself up and potentially make myself even worse. So that's what I think on that one. Now, question number 5. Here's an interesting one, lol. Can someone steal your energy? I think you'll like this one. Yeah, so again, these are the types of questions that I like. So can someone steal your energy? Now, in theory, no one can literally kind of just steal your energy. What can happen, though, is if someone comes along and they're really negative or they're pissed you off and they do stuff that triggers you or rubs you the wrong way and so on, you can end up spending a lot of energy mentally, emotionally, even spiritually and so on, trying to deal with this thing. So by the time they leave, you feel exhausted. So it's not like they literally come along and took your energy, but instead you spent a lot of energy trying to deal with them and being in their presence. So that we do have to be conscious of, is it worth me giving away this particular energy to deal with this thing? Or could I just remove myself from it? Or do I instead approach it differently so that I don't end up completely drained? Now, again, a lot of this might come down to reframing and seeing the experience from a different perspective so that it doesn't piss you off, trigger you, and make you feel like you're in a battle with them as such. So people can't actually steal your energy, but different energies can influence different people. So what I mean by that is, I'm sure you've had the scenario where you might walk into a room or walk into a party, for example, and there's just someone there. You're in the presence of a bunch of people, but there's just one person or even a couple, you're just like, I don't know about them. Like there's just something off about this guy or this girl, and I'm not sure about them. Like their energy's just off. The vibe is off. Well, this is because essentially we are energetic beings having a physical experience. But we have to remember that if we look into quantum physics and so on, everything is made of energy. So our energies do interact. And so you can walk into a place and experience somebody's energy, and it just might not resonate with your own. That's when we tend to get those bad vibes and feel like, there's something off about those. Like I don't enjoy being around them. They make me feel uncomfortable and so on. So we can get that. And the other thing that has also been kind of shown through that train of, also that line of science, the quantum stuff and the energy work and so on, is that generally speaking, if you have two individuals that are interacting together and you have one who's healthier and one that is less healthy, generally the healthier person will kind of bleed almost life force into the other one because they have more of an abundance of it that will automatically kind of drain or drift into the other person, as weird as that sounds. So our energies can shift and so on, but it's not necessarily the person stealing it. It's just a case of you being of a higher vibrational state, and that will tend to lift their vibrational state at the same time. So yeah, more so than bleeding and you losing it, it's more a case of you elevate their state of being for being such a high vibrational energy yourself. Cool. Right, here we go. Number 6. Is adrenaline good for your health when you're getting older? Is adrenaline good for your health when you're getting older? Okay, so with this particular one, adrenaline is just one of those natural responses in the body. Obviously, adrenaline is essentially a hormone or neurotransmitter within the body. And often it is released in response to stress, extreme excitement, and things like that. And it's part of the process to kind of rev your body up and get it ramped up to respond to a situation. So as part of that fight or flight response we spoke about earlier, you've got your stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and so on. They will all get released in order to activate the body and make it ready to fight or flight. So either to engage in the combat, you know, whether physical or mental or whatever, or whether to run away from it. So essentially what happens is a lot of your body's resources are diverted away from your digestive organs and things like that, and it's shuttled into the working muscles and into the heart, brain, and lungs, again, to prepare you to be able to fight or flight. So we need this response regardless of our age. Now, the way we would have to look at it, as in whether it's good or bad for you as you're getting older, it's more a case of, well, as we get older anyway, our body tends to naturally shift more towards that more fight or flighty or stress sympathetic type state, because obviously we're not in what we call a parasympathetic, which is on the other side of the nervous system. We're not in that regenerative state anymore. We're beyond adulthood, and the body is essentially aging. So over time, it loses its regenerative capacity and capabilities. Now, of course, the rate at which this is done depends on how well you look after yourself. So you can have people who are 60 who are way healthier and more resilient than people who are in their 30s if they've looked after themselves relative to the 30-year-old who may not have looked after themselves. So it's not necessarily a case of adrenaline is bad, but what we have to remember is that for the average person, their recovery capacity and their body's physiological capacity to deal with stress and shit basically going on in their life, that is reduced because of the fact that our body doesn't function as well as it did. It's not as efficient. The processes aren't as clean and efficient as they were, and our physiological responses aren't as fluid as they were. They're not as accurate as they were, and so on. So it's not to say that they don't take place, but the body's kind of tolerance ranges tends to widen. Our receptor sensitivity and things like that will tend to lessen as we age, unless we're doing things specifically to slow down that aging process by looking after ourselves with good food, obviously good exercise, good sleep and recovery, and even potentially good supplementation for certain things, in order to help slow down that aging process within the cells and so on. So no, adrenaline isn't bad for you when you get older, but we do have to maybe manage our stress and things better so that we're not in a chronic state of stress without even realizing it, or struggling to overcome and respond to it or heal from it because of the fact that we are older, but we're not really supporting ourselves through our daily sort of health routine. Cool. Question 7. Anger, is it good for you, or should you just let it go? So kind of similar to the last one. So anger itself is not bad. Like it's essentially, it's an emotional state, obviously, or it's a feeling that we would get. And often we just use it as a tool to get the particular response that we want, or the response that we think that we need. For example, you might be driving down the road, somebody pulls in, cuts you up, or you're coming off a slip road or they're coming off a slip road, sorry, and they cut you up and you've had to brake really hard and it triggers you. Oh, you fucking idiot, blah, blah, blah. And we get pissed off and stressed. Now, the truth is this person may have just genuinely not seen you. They probably didn't just deliberately go, oh, here's someone I can just pull out on and act a twat. It's probably more a case of they actually didn't see you. And therefore, once you've come along, they've pulled out, accidentally cut you up. Now your response is anger and stress because you need to prove to this person that they did wrong by you. Like, what the fuck? How dare you pull out on me, you fucking idiot, and so on. So anger is often a tool we use to get the response we want. We almost want them to apologize and be sorry for what they've just done, even though it may not have been a deliberate thing. So with your question where you say, well, is it good or should you just let it go? There are times where we would want to let it go if it's not going to serve us in the moment. So like the being cut up thing, you might just be like, well, actually, maybe they just didn't see me. So I've got a choice here. I can either choose to be angry and screw up the rest of my day or the next hour or so where I'm pissed off for this idiot that pulled out on me. Or you could just be like, oh, well, maybe they didn't see me. No big deal. And that way you can stay obviously a lot calmer about it. Because ultimately, as I say, it's a choice. It's if we give ourselves a moment to actually experience what we're about to do before we do it, then we can choose our response rather than have that immediate response. The catch for many of us, of course, is that the anger comes out and we direct it at this particular thing in the moment. But what we actually find is that anger is triggered from past issues that we didn't actually resolve. And then we take it out on this other person. So ultimately, anger is not bad. It's simply a tool that we use. But what is important is to find out kind of what things trigger you so that you can avoid being too angry too often. Cool. We just had a couple of comments come in from Ricky saying hi. Hi, Ricky. Hope you're all good, mate. It's good to see you here. Like I mentioned to the guys earlier, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I will get them answered. So we have one more question here, if no others come in. This is number 8 now. So question number, where are we? Question number 8. Random question about cells. So as cells make up the human body, can fat cells, as cells hold information, hold emotional data or create emotional states? Don't know if I've explained that right. Okay, cool. So this is a good question. Now this question, just for some context, is in response to a video I put up the other day on my Facebook page, where I was sort of saying how I myself, even though I've always been in pretty good shape, have never had the actual body that I want. And I was sort of talking about various things in relation to that. And I also spoke, following on from that, about one of my clients who's had some real big changes in his body and physique over the past year or so. And then he commented, because I'd mentioned how since he's transformed his body, he's been in a much better place mentally and emotionally. So he's transformed his body in the training, but he also comes to my martial arts class. And in that class, he's far less emotionally reactive or responsive to things when they don't kind of go his way and so on. And this has happened since he's shifted and changed his body. which then led to him with this follow-up question of, well, do our fat cells store emotion and emotional data, and can they create emotional states? Now, there's no particular science that I'm aware of that says your cells hold emotional data. No, so that's wrong. What I mean is your fat cells. So there's nothing that says, oh, your fat cells hold emotions, if you know what I mean. But of course, being fat can influence your emotional state because of how you perceive yourself. So if I hate my body and the way it looks, and I catch myself in the mirror and I'm disgusted by it and so on, that is going to affect my emotional state. Now, the other thing that we have to remember is that our body, or our cells, basically every thought that we have has a physical manifestation in the body. So our cells respond to all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, emotions, and so on, and they will respond accordingly. So you'll see it maybe even in yourself if you're a bit stressed and whatnot, and you find your shoulders get tight, and a lot of people are all hunched up, and we carry a lot of stress and emotion in the trap muscles. Some people will often have real tight hips and hip flexors and so on because they have a lot of kind of locked up sexual energy and things like that. Often people will have a lot of tension around the diaphragm and the upper abdominals and the digestive system if they struggle with asserting themselves and speaking their truth and being the truest version of themselves. If they can't act authentically, we tend to hold a lot of tension there because it's the center of personal power. We can get neck issues if there are things that we won't express and say to people that we know we need to say and so on. So we know that energetically, the body will have a physical response to our thoughts and feelings and emotions and so on. But I'm not aware of anything that says that fat cells specifically will hold emotional data. That may be a thing, but if I'm honest, I've not ever heard anything about that in the past almost 20 years I've been doing this thing, specific to fat cells. But as I say, being fat or having a greater level of body fat is very likely to influence your emotional state because of the way you perceive yourself, more so from my understanding than actually, oh, well, because you've got additional fat cells, therefore you've got more emotional feelings or more emotions or emotional data in those fat cells. Now, we do obviously have to be aware that on average, if I do have a higher body fat percentage, my estrogen levels and things are likely to be higher also. And of course, that having a higher estrogen level can make you more emotional and so on, with it being more of a female dominant hormone. Of course, we all have that, whether male or female, but generally speaking, females tend to be more emotionally in tune and have a greater expression of their emotions, partly because a lot of us guys obviously have been conditioned to not show emotion and so on. But at the same time, some of that is also due to things like estrogen levels and so on, the more female dominant hormones. So yes, good question. Thank you for that one. But I'm not aware of any specific data that says that, oh, your fat cells will create emotional states. It's more about how you perceive yourself in relation to being fat that might then lead to an emotional state or a negative emotional state that you didn't want to experience. So hope that helps. Okay, so I will just have a quick breeze through here just to make sure I've had no other questions come in on the other channels. Where are we? Right, it looks like we're good. So it looks like we'll be wrapping up here. Now, as always, guys, if you do have any questions, just drop the comments in and then I will answer them on next week's live Q&A. That's absolutely not a problem at all. I love helping you guys. I love answering your questions so that you can hopefully then take that information and powerfully move forward and get results. Now, if you have any questions, like I say, drop them below. And if not, I'm going to wrap this one up and chat to you guys in my next video. See you later.